Yep.
Efficient with everybody's time tonight.
Good enough. So we're ready to start then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
All right.
Mr. Rittenhouse. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Efficient with everybody's time tonight. Wonderful.
Good enough.
Well,
So
we're
ready to start then,
reviewing
right?
legal and policy agenda meeting on June 10th at 4:30. Thanks for the members present. Mrs. McKittrick, Dr. Akbar, Mr. Alexander, and we also have Dinah Feidel, Board Counsel, Superintendent James, and myself, Ryan Pendleton. I think that's all on the line. So thanks for joining. We'll try to be efficient with everybody's time. We do have one member that needs to slide at 5 o'clock, so I want to have some of the policy revisions first. If it's okay with you guys, I'd like to get a little bit of an introduction on the racial equity policy and the resolution to declare racism a public health crisis from Dr. Akbar. And then we've attached two policies in the agenda, as you can see, policy 2260-04 and policy 2260-05, hearing the direction from the board as well as the action items from the board meeting. We attach these two policies as ideas that we may need to take a look at those and make sure they interact and filter, I think is the way I said it to Dr. Akbar afterwards. We need to make sure that the resolution passed is just not a standalone policy, that it's interwoven into every policy and action that we do. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Akbar, Mr. Alexander, just to kind of give further direction there. Maybe spend a couple minutes walking us through what you think the board's expectations are.
Bruce, you want to go first? Since the conversation.
I think Bruce is gone.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, boy.
So I'll give some backdrop. And then when Bruce comes, he can share some more. So
sounds good.
So basically, as I was having conversations with all of the members about the resolution and what proactive actions that we can take as a board to move the district forward, to directly address the issues. And Bruce began to share about Cube and some things he learned about, specifically having a racial equity policy that strengthens the equity policy that we currently have. And so that's where that derived from. And so he has some other points, and I don't want to share them for him. So hopefully he'll join here, and he's back. And I was just sharing, Bruce, that in our conversations about the resolution, you mentioned about strengthening the equity policy with actual racial equity policy. So if you want to start the conversation around that and its importance, and then I'll add anything that I have.
Okay. I'll just go ahead and start by saying we do have an equity policy, and with our equity policy underneath that, which I mentioned on Monday's meeting, you break down, you start digging to a deeper dive into equity itself. You come up with racial equity. And so after a resolution that Dr. Akbar presented to us on Monday, and when we talked, he and I talked prior, I mentioned that this would probably be the time for us to, with all the things that are going on in the United States and across the world dealing with equity, or race rather, this is the time for us to start our racial equity policy. So therefore, we will begin to draft and racial equity policy that will somewhat mirror what we've did in our resolution, but it'll be a policy, standalone policy, just like it is with our equity policy. What we'll do. And then once we're done drafting, we'll bring it, of course, like as we always do, we'll send it out to everyone for their review and get their input and so forth. And then, bring it back and dissect it and then move forward with having a policy.
So,
Any questions?
Dr.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to extend on what Bruce said, just in a brief way possible. Our equity policy itself talks about the way we provide students what they need in order to be successful without bias, prejudice, or discrimination. It does not specifically call out racism and things that are related to racism specifically. And so while our equity policy is good, as we talk about eradicating racism, this equity policy, this racial equity policy will strengthen that and specifically talk about the gaps we have around race and how we can mitigate that, how we can look at racial conscious decision making around finances and human resources, specifically to hiring, as well as some learning outcome disparities in order to really look at those and try to do something proactive to eliminate that. So it just takes it one step further than what we currently have.
And am I safe to say that the resolution action items we can also insert into that policy?
Yes.
Yes. Like the hiring one can definitely go in there. The police one can go in there. Yes. So all of that could be wrapped into that.
Okay, great. So I think let me add some commentary here to our current policies of under section 2000, policy 2260 and the equity policy. As this policy begins to take shape from the resolution Monday night, we'll start to also update Bruce, that original equity policy that came to the board now since 2017.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't realize it's been that's it's pretty amazing.
2.5 years.
Yeah, for sure.
And Ryan, it is a time too, and we probably should have, but we were doing a lot of things. I know in equity, you were doing a lot with finances, and Dr. James and Carla have been working on having meetings on other areas of equity. This would be a time to review again, after we get this racial equity policy, to review our equity policy and see if we want to make any amendments or changes to that as well.
Dr. Akbar, Mr. Alexander, anything additional? We also do have another board member on the call, Mrs. McKittrick. Anything additional on that item as we get started following up from Monday night's resolution?
I don't see anything at this right now. Maybe a little later and further look at something possibly, but right now I think we're doing okay. I think we should hear from Ms. McKittrick as well, because she's on the line. I'd like to hear from her.
I am eager to get these things included in a new policy, but I will wait and see how you incorporate it and be happy to fill in any gaps as well. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
The one thing I'll add is the ERGs would need to be its own policy, so it wouldn't be wrapped into this. Just, I wanted to clarify my last comment there.
Got it. Okay. All right, moving on. 202 is the naming or renaming of an APS facility. We embedded that also in Mr. Alexander, you've championed this for a while. We do have purpose, policy, and criteria with lots of input from staff and board. I've brought that policy up if you guys are able to view it. This, and just in my opinion, and looking down through that prior to the meeting, this may be ready for quote unquote first reading at a board meeting. Not that I want to miss any timelines, but I'm thinking about our return to school and obviously everybody's efforts around return to school. This might be good to have in place by third or fourth quarter. Might be good to have in place by the first of the year. So the action item I put in the agenda was, let's give ourselves a timeline that we can start the first reading, start detailing anything extra from additional board members. By then, possibly we might be in person for a few meetings and discuss that one further, but I also don't want to make any assumptions on behalf of the board. What do you guys think?
And Ryan, we have gotten all our input from everyone thus far, I believe, haven't we?
We've got board member commentary. We've got staff, senior staff commentary. We haven't had a discussion about it, obviously, since probably a serious discussion about it since prior to COVID. It might be nice to have that discussion in depth soon.
Okay.
So I just have one thing.
Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah, I just have one thing. And maybe I'm wrong, but can we just double check and see that we didn't have a first reading already at the board meeting? I feel like we did. We didn't talk about it, but I thought we presented it for a first reading previously, and that technically everything we're doing inside of the committee meeting is the second reading. So taking it back to the board would be a third reading, if the way I'm seeing it is correct.
Yeah, if we've already had it on the agenda, and I'm not sure if we had it on the board agenda for first meeting or not. I don't remember. So, but maybe Ryan, you can check for us. And if we,
I'm checking now.
Okay.
If I can get that
Yeah.
answered tonight, I will.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. We've talked about it a few times, but I can't remember if it was definitely at the full board meeting. But I feel like we did present it, or at least talk about it at the full board meeting. I don't know if
we did, and I'm how do I say it? I'm trying to be very conscious with the superintendent. Sorry about the background noise there. I'm trying to be very conscious of the superintendent, staff, and board's time as it relates to these policies and others, so that this isn't taking precedence over something else as you have directed us. So
Right.
That's why, I don't want people to think that we're stalling on this, but we're not back to school yet. We're not back in session yet. There's been obviously more important policies and resolutions before us. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, are you okay keeping this out in front of us a little bit?
I just have one comment about it. Is that, as we have Kenmore Garfield, the new CLC, it's coming out of the ground. We are going to have to decide what we're going to call it. So my preference would be that it doesn't look like this is going to take a lot of work to get it finalized, but we need to get through the reading. So if there's going to be a name change, at least we would have a policy in place to follow.
Right. And David, what is Mr. Superintendent, what is the time frame for getting Kenmore Garfield? I think that would be good for us to know, so we can, when we move forward this year, we can have a timeline to have this done before then.
Right. I think our plan was to have it, or schedule that it would open in the fall of, at the earliest in the fall of 2022. But
Okay.
of course, we would need to know the name in advance of that, because of the, we have to do the contracts and for the building signage and all of that, and
Right.
colors. members. That's part of it too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think Ryan will be the best thing is for you to just go ahead and check and see if we had that first reading, and if we have, we can continue the discussion and we would I guess this would be the second reading, and then once we know we're ready to finalize it and put it on for the third reading at our board meeting, and then we at our future board meetings, and we can finalize this and be done with it.
Yeah, I thought we had a first reading at a board meeting for this as well.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we'll find out, and we can always debate this and discuss at board meetings and policy meetings without having a reading, so to speak. So we'll get that answered, and then based on David's timelines, why don't our action item for tonight's meeting is that we will give you an action plan timeline, and then we'll have that prior to the next agenda. I see head shaking yes, so we'll do that, and then you can modify that. Again, sorry about the background noise. I'm sitting at a Panera trying to feel up a little bit, so I apologize about that. All right. Hey, our next action item is 2.03, and it's a second reading on policy.
You're breaking up, Ryan.
Yeah.
Final.
Ryan, you're still breaking like you're frozen now.
When we have technology
Okay.
issues like that, that's when you say the most brilliant things.
I heard my name, so maybe I can chime in here.
Diana, can you update us on that
Sure. So
electronic signature policy for second reading?
Sure. So right now, the Board of Education never adopted a policy like specifically authorizing and giving authority to electronic signatures. Neola had sent out a draft policy some years ago, I think around 2012, and for whatever reason at the time, the Board of Education did not adopt that policy. When Neola issued it, it wasn't considered a must-pass policy, but it was still recommended. The policy is based on a section of the Ohio Revised Code that gives sort of legal validity to any electronic document and electronic signature. So there's already laws in place that support the district's ability to operate in sort of electronic records and e-signatures and so on and so forth. But recently the issue, and from my understanding, the business side of the Board of Education does routinely use electronic signatures and documents and things like that. The issue has come up recently in light of the pandemic and the school closure about accepting electronic signatures for things like permission slips, for things like enrollment forms and other documents from parents. Typically a teacher will send the paperwork home with the student, the parent or guardian will get it, they'll be able to sign it and return it with the student the next day. We don't have that anymore. And so there's been a couple inquiries from teachers about, wanting to get forms in and so on and so forth. And, there's a burden right now, right? I mean, a parent either, has to have access to the internet, be able to print it, sign it, scan it, return it. Snail mail can take forever. And so it came to my attention that this is something that is going on. We don't really have a sense of, whether or not some buildings are doing this, some aren't. And there's no uniform policy in place sort of governing how we're supposed to deal with electronic signatures. So I think that moving forward, we're going to need to give parents more flexibility to be able to e-sign certain documents. But in doing so, we want to make sure that there's a system that the district is using that's secure, that we know, can't be hacked, that we know the person who receives it is the one signing it, and that there's some uniformity in how we're implementing that kind of system. So unfortunately, there's no specific Neola draft policy that they had ready to go specific to parent signatures or student signatures if they're, of 18 years or older. So this is the base policy that they gave to us. And from there, we thought it would make sense to bring it to the board's attention, do a little due diligence on, what this policy should be, have input from senior staff, and then move forward, hopefully before the beginning of next year, so that this is something that teachers, principals, parents can use moving forward. And I also think now is the right time to adopt something like this, now that we have our enrollment that's all being done online. So this would sort of be an extension of that, in the sense that parents now are used to interfacing with Akron Public Schools in a much more digital way than maybe they were even just a year ago.
Okay, Diane, I have a question for everyone. I guess all of us. Neola, you said Neola hasn't really given us any direction or has any policy for something like this here. Do we know of any other school districts, maybe locally across the state or even across the country, who may have something like this that we could possibly review to get an idea and decide to come up with a way we would possibly want to draft our policy?
Yeah, so that's something we can definitely look into. I have not looked into that yet, but certainly will.
Okay, thank you. Dr.
You're
Akbar,
welcome.
had a question? Dr. Akbar, I think you had a question.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm on mute. I'm sorry.
All right.
So I guess I just want to get clarity on what you're saying. The strikeouts and everything that I looked at, or I'm looking at now, even that came from you, I'm assuming, and you're basically saying, in addition to what's here and the edits here, we need to add a parent component to this before we pass it.
So I didn't make the edits that are on that document. I provided the baseline policy that Neola sent us. And I think, yeah, the thing that we need to add to that and look into and examine is sort of how this could work regarding parent signatures for the various types of things that I mentioned: enrollment, permission slips, so on and so forth.
Okay. So I guess my question would be to David. Could we get some feedback from the staff or from administration around what needs to be included? So all the different components, and begin providing your feedback on that?
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, for instance, Ohio Department of Education has plenty of documents that I have to sign electronically, because they'll send a PDF, and then, you can do a PDF signature. I think some of our issues do have to have a lot to do with permission slips. It is difficult at times to get the paper permission slip back from parents, and just, going through our virtual learning episode this spring with COVID-19, we can have some staff take a look, and I think it can streamline some things for us and overcome some of the barriers with pushing more paper. We should be pushing less paper if possible.
Yeah, so one of the things that comes to mind, and I don't know how feasible this is, so you can say that doesn't work, but using text messages or even the all calls as a way to get at some of the electronic signatures. And I don't know how you can secure that, because I know there could be some level of insecurity.
Right.
But one of the other things that I was thinking about is when students enroll, having their parents select a pen that could be their pen to use in some of those avenues. So, but again, that's not my area. So there's probably a whole lot around data security that I couldn't even begin to think about.
Right. And it may just be getting a policy that sets the general framework, and then there are always administrative guidelines that we create, to give more definition to what's outlined in the policy.
Yeah, good point, David, on the administrative guidelines. I'm looking, kind of read through 6107. My question to Diana before we kind of table this one, does this contain the necessary sections of statute and directions in law as it relates to our responsibilities, so that if this does kind of, as to Superintendent mentioned, push it down to administrative guidelines on the specific measures we use, does this contain it, or do we need to take a look at it one more time for that?
Yeah, so the policy as written now mirrors the state code, and there's also a federal code about electronic signatures. So I'm comfortable that the legal language is present in this policy. And then I agree, sort of the mechanism that of whether, describing the type of software we use to make sure, it's a secure signature. I think that's something that should probably be in an administrative guideline, separate from the policy.
Okay. Again, one more question. Sorry about that. Is there any deadline on this?
So there's no deadline in the sense that there hasn't been a law change. There's no, this is not something that we need to adopt. It's just, there's been more issues that have come to my attention about having some sort of uniform policy regarding electronic signatures, especially for parents, in light of the school closure. So,
okay.
To the extent we want to provide a little more clarity before the beginning of next year, then I think the deadline would be by the end of summer.
Very good. Excellent. That's what I'm looking for.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions or comments on 2.03 before we finish out with our first reading reviews, prior to first reading reviews of purchasing?
No, I have no.
None. Let's go to 3.01. And I see, okay, 3.01 is policies of purchases, 6320 and 6325. Those will be on for first reading. Those slipped through the cracks, as I mentioned to you guys for the last board meeting, but those will be on for the next board meeting. And if you'll notice the hyperlinks on the policy, we've already started into them. So it's, let's see. Purchases, quotations, and bids. And then it's a federal procurement policy. And to my knowledge, these do not have any timelines associated with them. As long as they're in place within the next few months, we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, so I only have one question, and we can probably talk about this later, but I didn't see, and maybe this doesn't go in here, but the limits for each level where the section says limitation, and then it talks about principal and treasurer. Part of it doesn't have the limit amount there, as well as shouldn't there be another level of limitation, being administrators, central office administrators? I don't know exactly what the wording you would use, but I'm assuming they have budgets too, and they would be. Or
are you looking at policy, the federal procurement policy, or are you looking at the purchasing? Because the purchasing one does have some limitations in it, and our threshold internally for kind of quote unquote going out to bid is $10,000.
Yeah,
and then anything above 25,000 is our third purchasing threshold for regular purchases outside of capital expenditures. And those capital expenditures are at $50,000. I know that was updated in statute within the last couple of years. And so, but I'll scan those as these go out after first reading. And I see then announced certificates amounts of less than 25,000 may be paid by the treasurer upon completion of the then announced certificate. So I guess the maybe to your question is, one, it has to meet the appropriations. Two, it has to meet the proper encumbrance and threshold within the appropriations. And then if it exceeds, to your point, if it exceeds a certain dollar amount, then it has to come to board. Or if it's a service agreement, almost all service agreements come to board. I think what I'll do, Dr. Akbar, is we have a purchasing manual that also goes from the policy to the administrative guidelines to the purchasing manual. We're actually, we look at it every summer as it relates to the audit. I'll populate that for the board too, making sure we tie all three of those together.
Okay. I was just specifically looking at the limitation section.
Yeah,
And they're not dollar amounts to differentiate that.
we'll make sure if it's not in these policies, it may be in another one, or if it's not, we'll make sure it's clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan, I think you might check. I thought we had something like that already in another policy. I don't remember which one, but because I thought I remember some time ago that we put together a policy saying that if it's a certain amount that the superintendent and treasurer can go ahead and sign and go for it, but anything above that, then we had to be brought to the board. So we might want to look at that, and then that might be an assertion for.
I'm sure we do. I just don't have them tied to the agenda,
Yeah.
so I can't reference them. But we'll make sure to cite those.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Back to the agenda. So those will go on for first reading. Okay, so Neola has been received regarding the release of the final rule for U.S. Department of Education office. So
Breaking up.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
9. We're now into June. Obviously, we got.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
We missed your introduction.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, sorry about that. Before we adjourn tonight, I did want to ask a question. We've been together now 6 months in policy with a little bit of setbacks of not being in person. The way the agendas are flowing, I'd like to get some feedback either now or in the future, is we have discussion in the beginning as it relates to current and or future policies or maybe direction from board meetings. 2, we have more substantial discussion around second readings or policies that need board direction, detailed discussion, kind of the cursory review before moving on to third readings and in front of the board. And then the final agenda item would be first readings, the introductions, ones that we're not spending as much time on. I want to get your thoughts on that. That seems how our last couple agendas have been working out. I think it's working well, but I wanted to get your thoughts.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think everything is going well. And Brian, I've been on the policy committee for a while, and it's taken we've evolved a lot, and I think the process is going well, and I think we should continue to move forward with it. And I think if we do think there needs to be some adjustment, Dr. Akbar is wise and smart enough to come to notice that, as well as other board members who can notice that, and they can bring it to our attention, and we can talk about things there. If we need to do something, we'll wait and see.
Sounds good. Any other items from committee members?
No, but I missed what you said about the U.S. Department of Ed, Title IX, and all of that. So
We included, we'll start to include legal updates as it relates to Neola policy updates or legal alerts. This one was written by Peter Kalale and Mark Hawkes, a law firm up north, and it was an update on Title IX. And it's just, and I'm sure Mrs. Feidel has gotten copies of these as well. So we just want to start including legal updates in our agendas.
Okay, that works.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is Diana. Along those lines, I mean, we expect that Neola will release new policies to amend existing ones, or potentially they'll either be brand new policies or amend existing ones in light of this new rule from the U.S. Department of Education. And it's really going to revolve around how the district investigates allegations of sexual harassment amongst students, and be a lot more prescriptive as far as the accused rights, victim rights, and along those lines. So we do anticipate that those policies will be released shortly, and that this committee will definitely have to review those pretty quickly, given that the law takes effect at the end of August.
And Diana, what is your time frame for maybe getting that to us? Could you say we need to have this done by this summer?
Sure, we're still waiting for Neola to issue the draft policies. So as soon as we have those, I anticipate that they'll send them out in the next week or two. But I will tell you that these regulations were hundreds of pages long, and they were a long time coming. So I have no doubt that Neola it's gonna take them a little bit to work through them. I haven't read all of them yet, but I'm aware of them, have been tracking it, have read, some of the summaries that are out there and so on and so forth. So, everyone's sort of digesting what is a very large document right now, but that's sort of the gist of what the policies will be.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So if thinking about what she said, and then what you said earlier about how we might want to function, thinking about we may want to look at July, maybe having 2 meetings so we can get through some of those. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah. If we need it, I agree with you, Dr. Akbar. If we need that, then I think we could go ahead and have 2 to get that moving and have it done by August.
Sounds good. All right, Mr. Superintendent, any additional items?
Nothing from me.
All right. Pretty efficient meeting, 5:15 here. We can stay on for another 15, 20 minutes if you guys want to hang out.
I would say, yeah, we can hang out, but I can't say what I want to say on screen.
All right.
It has something to do with making you happy.
We will adjourn then, and be safe all, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. You too.